It is a cliché of modern politics that how you look is more important than what you say. That elections are now won by candidates who can handle a barrage of lenses that follow their every move. But was it any different in the early days of cinema? Before moving pictures, a leader could expect to be seen only by a tiny proportion of his or her subjects in a lifetime. They remained remote, almost mythical figures. In just 1 week of cinema admissions, millions of people could now be given the illusion of really seeing their leaders. Kings and presidents were presented with an unrivaled opportunity to project the spectacle of their power wherever films were shown.
Their Royal Highnesses were shown life-size on the screen, and the portraits were excellent.
Most of the royal families of Europe latched on quickly to the new medium. Both the Danish and Russian royal courts commissioned extensive film coverage of court life. The British royal family got off to a bad start. In June 1896, Burt Akers, one of the first British filmmakers, cut a hole through the canvas of the entrance to an exhibition in Cardiff in order to get a shot of the Prince of Wales arriving. There was outrage when the film, now lost, revealed the prince scratching the royal ear. The coverage of Queen Victoria's visit to Dublin in 1900 was far more discreet. Indeed, the Queen is hardly visible. But 10 months later, the same cameraman, Cecil Hepworth, was able to get much closer to the action. Too close for comfort.
I had a wonderful position for the most solemn funeral in history. Then, at the moment of greatest tension, the silence was shattered. If I could have had my dearest wish, then the ground would certainly have opened at my feet and swallowed me and my beastly machine. But the noise had one curious effect. It caught the attention, as it must certainly have done, of the new king, Edward VII. And I believe that is why he halted the procession, so that posterity might have the advantage of the cinematograph record.
But even film-friendly Edward VII believed that there were limits. Camera operators were allowed to record his coronation procession in 1902. But it was felt that the moment of crowning in Westminster should remain veiled in mystery. One operator, however, wasn't prepared to accept the restriction. George Méliès resorted to a familiar filmmaker's solution. He faked a coronation.
The English authorities refused to allow me to film during the ceremony, but they did authorize me to reconstruct the scene under the benevolent supervision of the Chief Master of Ceremonies. And with the collaboration of all the civil and military dignitaries, I was able to make detailed drawings from the furnishings to the costumes, so that I was able to make an historically accurate recreation of the scene.
Méliès preceded the Abbey interior with real shots of the procession to the Abbey. Edward was apparently pleased with his reconstruction. Méliès was therefore wounded to be accused
of being a common forger. This is what it cost our inventor for having attempted too soon to make a reconstruction, whilst audiences still believe that if it is a photograph, then it must be true.
Increasingly, ceremonial events were organized to accommodate the film cameras, though they were kept at a discreet distance. Events like the investiture of the Prince of Wales in 1911, devised by Lloyd George, were media events designed to stress national unity, a function underlined by the newsreel coverage of the event.
The investiture ceremony. Ceremony or investiture. The presentation at the King's Gateway. Cyflwyniad a Morth a Brenin.
Gaumont showed the investiture with titles in both Welsh and English, the first Welsh-English bilingual film ever made. And film of the Second Delhi Durbar was designed to impress the viewer with the unity and might of the British Empire.
King George V visited India in person for the most magnificent Durbar in history.
Though the event proved to be hard going for the man at the centre of it all.
Rather tired after wearing the crown for 3.5 hours. It hurt my head, as it's pretty heavy.
Though he clearly found it uncomfortable, George V made a point of providing photo opportunities.
His Majesty received Monsieur Poincaré and General Joffre.
By the time of the First World War, the cinema was no longer confined to a working-class audience.
A visit to the wounded at a casualty clearing station.
And the King accepted the need to be seen in propaganda films on the Western Front. And camera operators dutifully shot loyal cutaways, even when there was no king in sight.
On the road, Australian and New Zealand troops giving His Majesty a hearty welcome.
The change after 1917 to a more informal style in front of the camera, to the user-friendly House of Windsor, worked with audiences. Royalty became the stars of the newsreel, at the same time as Hollywood was refining its own star system.
His Majesty returned to Buckingham Palace in July.
The newsreel companies displayed a slavish devotion to the royal family, bending over backwards to display them in a positive light. Even a cup final becomes a royal story. In 1923, there was a pitch invasion before the kickoff. In the newsreel version made by Topical Budget, the King almost saves the day.
The King invites the crowd under the Royal Arch.
The editor then cuts in another caption card, and a crowd shot apparently taken from the presentation of the cup at the end of the game. Edward, Prince of Wales during this period, was even more popular than his parents. Like Prince Charles, Edward was a keen horseman.
HRH is a fearless horseman.
He appeared regularly riding in steeplechases.
Always a thruster.
Unfortunately, he wasn't very good at it. Camera operators used to gather at the first fence in the hope of a fall.
Hard luck, sir.
Despite his irritation, they knew the permitted limits. Until his abdication, there was no media reference to the prince's relationship with the divorced Mrs. Simpson, even though the newsreels craved royal stories. Tapping patriotic feelings was useful for monarchs. For ambitious politicians, it was not. Lloyd George first made his name as a Welsh patriot. Pancho Villa as a Mexican patriot. Churchill as a British patriot. But the man who beat them all to it, the creator of the political photo opportunity, was Theodore Roosevelt. He featured in more than 380 films in 20 years. The Hollywood president is a long-standing American tradition. His first big chance came with the Spanish-American War in Cuba in 1898. It was also a big chance for filmmaker Albert Smith.
A a wave of patriotism can be as valuable to a picture maker as a wave of passion. Mr. Roosevelt's zeal for publicity was alive and roaring.
When Roosevelt went to Cuba as one of the commanders of the cowboy cavalry company, the Rough Riders, he made sure his own horse, a camera and a cameraman went with him.
With nationalistic feeling at fever pitch, we set out to photograph what the people wanted to see.
The Rough Riders and Roosevelt got the coverage that gave them and him almost mythic status. And when it needed supplementing, the Edison Company simply set up additional sequences back home, with Theodore Roosevelt, the Patriot, center stage. But Roosevelt didn't have it all his own way. After his Rough Rider venture, he got coverage as a big game hunter. Another Edison operator then satirized his media manipulation. But that didn't stop him getting elected president 4 years later. Roosevelt's blatant self-publicizing pales into insignificance when compared to Pancho Villa's. Villa was a Mexican rebel leader who in 1913 began a guerrilla war against a right-wing regime which had dissolved parliament and refused to call fresh elections. Americans became fascinated by the battles being fought out on their border. War had become a spectator's.
Residents on the American side watching the battle behind a stone wall.
Getting film of the battle itself was more dangerous. War footage was what mattered, and who better to supply it than the man of the moment, Pancho Villa himself.
The Mutual Film Corporation agrees to pay General Pancho Villa $25,000 and a 50% royalty for the exclusive rights to film his campaign.
Mutual's rivals were stunned by the first attempt at checkbook journalism, but the New York Times soon realized that Villa would have a problem delivering his end of the contract.
On my signal!
To be a useful partner in this business, General Villa will have to do more than let the cameramen get what they can. He must see to it that the really interesting charges are made when the light is good, and that a satisfactory part of the killing and dying is done in focus.
Unfortunately for Mutual, most of the crucial battle for Ojinaga was fought in darkness. But the general did his best to meet his contract by arranging shots of himself. Indeed, he insisted on more and more shots of himself. His ego, already considerable, was further inflated by this process. Eventually, Mutual resorted to filming with no film in the camera in order to keep the great man happy. The cameras helped to turn Pancho Villa from a rebel poseur into a Mexican myth. The camera conceals as much as it reveals, rarely going beyond the public pose. There were British politicians, too, who quickly saw the value of the film and photo opportunity.
The Great East End Anarchist Battle. 700 police and military endeavoring to capture the police murderers.
In 1911, a group of Latvian anarchists shot 3 police and were trapped in a house in Sydney Street. Winston Churchill, then the Liberal Home Secretary, made sure he was on the spot.
Concerned to observe photographs in the illustrated newspapers of the Home Secretary in the danger zone. I understand what the photographer was doing, but why the Home Secretary?
Tory leader Balfour was sceptical about Churchill's motives. When Churchill's secretary went to see the first ever film of Churchill at a local cinema, he was taken aback by the reaction.
Shoot him!
British politicians had to be much more cautious about the way they used cinema than their American counterparts. In 1916, they could get away with this bizarre piece of film, The Silent Interview. But the cameraman, Cecil Hepworth, wasn't allowed to proceed with a planned shot of a cabinet meeting in 10 Downing Street for fear of press ridicule. Hepworth was furious.
How the people of a few years hence will laugh at a dignity which was afraid of being sullied by contact with the kinematograph, the greatest and most powerful vehicle for the conveyance of thought which the world has ever produced.
One British politician of this period pushed the use of film up to and beyond the acceptable limits. David Lloyd George.
The day of the cottage-bred man is at hand.
Lloyd George soon abandoned his early flirtation with Welsh nationalism. Although it was useful to recall his simple Welsh roots, it was now important to reach the wider British audience that had become regular cinema-goers. He portrayed himself to them as the happy family man.
My basic idea is to get on.
In reality, he was having a series of affairs. They were not revealed by the media of the day and did not impede his climb to the top.
So far, things look promising, but I'm not sure of success.
But even when he became Prime Minister, Lloyd George was still careful to accommodate the newsreel cameras, and he had more ambitious plans. The first ever drama documentary of a living politician. He gave his blessing to a plan by Harry Rawson, founder of the Ideal Film Company, to make a full-length feature.
The first revolt against the...
Rawson missed no opportunity to underline the connections with the war then raging.
The story of David and Goliath. So David smote Goliath. There was no sword in the hand. Smote Goliath and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Knowing his cause was just, David faced tyrannic violence and overcame it.
The filmmakers included Lloyd George's anti-war period, a restaging of a meeting in Birmingham when supporters of the Boer War had broken up his meeting.
Mr. Lloyd George, your life is in danger. We must get you out disguised as a policeman.
The film also restaged an election triumph. And a visit to a fake Western Front. The filmmaker's climax was a restaging of Lloyd George's first speech as Prime Minister.
It is the greatest war ever waged. The issues that hang upon it are the gravest that have been attached to any conflict in which humanity has ever been involved.
But by the time of demobilization in 1919, the national mood had changed. The film tried to be sensitive to the sense of bereavement and disillusion.
I have always been confident that we would get through. For I know we were fighting for the right, and that the God of righteousness would see us through.
But the real Lloyd George was aware that he was becoming a target of both the left and the right. In October 1918, the magazine John Bull published an article by Horatio Bottomley, a right-wing journalist. It claimed, wrong, that Ideal was a German-constituted company, and correctly that Rawson was a Jew who had changed his name from Rosenbaum. That was enough in the hysterical mood of the time. There was now a risk that the film could become an embarrassing scandal. a representative of the government solicitor, arrived at Ideal Studios in late October, handed over £20,000 in £1,000 notes, and removed all 16 cans of The Life of David Lloyd George. The film disappeared until its rediscovery in 1994. Lloyd George had to rely on more conventional coverage.
Welsh National Pageant. Premier's family take part in historical pageant held in beautiful grounds of Harlech Castle.
His family seemed to jump through whatever hoops were placed in their way, although daughter Meghan sometimes seemed to find the umpteenth call for a smile hard going. Newsreels, then as now, were personality-led. What Lloyd George or the Prince of Wales were up to counted for more than the political turmoil that the country was experiencing. In the topical budget compilation of 1923, there is no mention of the growing strength of the trade union movement, of the 600 strikes during that year, of the liberalisation of the divorce laws in favour of women. The New Leader, the Journal of the Independent Labour Party, wrote in 1929,
Always militarism, jingoism, sabre-rattling or sport. Never internationalism, peace, scientific advance, or any matters likely to raise the intellectual and moral standards of the people.
But it could have been worse. And in Germany, it was. Their newsreels were increasingly dominated by one man. And from 1929 on, that man had a film voice.
Kann ich dem untreu werden, was einem ganzen Leben Inhalt, Sinn und Zweck gegeben hat?
The arrival of the talkies provided politicians with even greater opportunities for winning votes. And for those who didn't have to worry about winning votes, an even more powerful weapon for mass propaganda. Stalin often had himself played by an actor. The haunting image of Lenin was an actor too. "50 years later, an ex-actor took the most powerful office on earth. The spectacle of the politician as actor had come of age. The distinction between fact and fiction, between power and pictures of power, is as difficult to see clearly now as it was when film began.
Real Truth concludes 7:30 next Wednesday.